Hello, I'm Herm Gailey. I'm here at home actually, but a couple times a summer we have what we think of as a ride-in. People bring their horses and we get together and ride and maybe work on something that needs a little work. Why don't you pan around there so people can see the assemblage of folks we've got. We're gonna have a little picnic after this is over if everybody survives. And if not, we'll have a wake instead. So what we're going to do, this is Jeff Flaharty. He's really a lifetime friend of mine. And like I do, Jeff has always started his own horses. This is a 3-year-old filly by the Good Horse Play Gun. Or excuse me, a hired gun by Play Gun. And she's not been saddled. So Jeff is an ambitious sort. He brought her over today. We turned her out for a while to get her used to being away from home because she's never been hauled anywhere. And we figured, why not put a saddle on her? I believe that she's ready enough. And so trial by fire, we're gonna go ahead and saddle her. Now what we've done so far is to let her investigate the saddle. So Jeff, you wanna bring her up and see if she wants to sniff that anymore? She was pretty interested in it at first. She's standing on a slack line, that's good, and maybe just rub her a little bit with that pad. Yeah, there you go. Curiosity is the antidote to fear. Now, if she grabs that in her teeth and waves in her face, it might be a whole different story. So why don't you sort of rub her with that pad a little bit, get her used to the idea that that might go on her. She has been round penned a little bit, so we've got enough control to move her around when we need to. She's not doing anything fancy at this point. But I'd be pleased, Jeff, at the way she's taking that.
Yeah, I am.
Yep. It's pretty clear that she trusts Jeff, who doesn't overhandle his horses. And I say that without a hint of irony or sarcasm or anything. I'm the same way. When they're young, before I start riding, I check on them with binoculars every so often, and that's close enough. Jeff uses a telescope. Why don't you shift to the other side and just make sure she's comfortable with things going from that side. So this is where you find out a little bit how your horse wants to be. But remember, still waters run deep. I would be surprised if this filly didn't buck pretty hard when we cinch her up and turn her loose. And for my taste, that's okay. If that's what she needs to do to figure this out, that's all right. You don't want her to keep doing it, but for the short haul, it's okay. So that seems to not be bothering her. She's also a horse that I think we could bore to death, so why don't you get the saddle and just sort of approach her with it. Let her see that things rattle, but they don't hurt her. Now, you may notice the size of that saddle. It's a kid saddle. It's on a horse tree. It's nice to saddle young horses because it's easy to put on. So just sort of rub it against her, show it to her, let it jangle around there a bit. Now, the other thing that would be good watching is we might have Jeff put a first ride on her in that saddle. So see how that goes. And Jeff is pretty brave. He's dropped the lead line altogether. I don't know if I'd do that, but then I don't own the horse. If she runs off and jumps the fence, well, that falls into the not my problem category. But what you might do is take that rope, and you don't have to hold it in your hand, but you could lay it over your arm like so.
All right.
And that'll give you a plan B. Because I've used the whole alphabet worth of plans. Yeah, and you know, all of that stuff, being tangled up, that's just an opportunity. What you don't want to do is sneak around your horse. Just go at her like this is something you do every day, no big deal, and she'll tend to not make it a big deal herself. What is likely to happen is when we cinch her, she may buck. She hasn't been body roped, which is something I typically will do, but it's optional. So she's pretty interested in that saddle. Why don't you just go at it from the right side, because she's going to have to get used to having that coming from the opposite side. So you're on kind of a balance point with these young horses, because you don't want to stress them and scare them. You don't want to scare them to death, but you don't want to bore them to death either. So if you expect her to stand still and do things she's already figured out how to do for too long, she's going to find some way to amuse herself. So I'd say just put the saddle on. I'm going to stay out of harm's way, and Jeff, don't you worry, I am perfectly safe. Can't say a thing about you, but I'm perfectly safe. There you go. We've got a light pad and a little undersized pad on there. Now Jeff's back to his old ways. He's got the rope line there on the ground, but he has been known to live dangerously. So,
ooh, at least parting thanks to you.
So I have no idea how that's adjusted. Might have been on a thicker one, although she's pretty deep.
It's up there pretty far.
So if you want to draw it up on this side, that'd be fine too. And it's an opportunity to let her stand there with the saddle on her. Again, you could be very meticulous and make sure this was properly adjusted by making a very measured study of how thick she is. But on the other hand, maybe it's better she just sort of has it the way it's going to be. Now I'm hoping that whatever you did on the other side isn't going to hang up if she jumps.
It's tied. It won't be now. There we go.
Well, I'm not real worried about it falling off. I'm worried about it staying on and getting in a bad place. So this is, again, the first time this filly's really been away from home. And so she's looking for friends.
All right, we're ready to tie this up.
You get tight enough?
It's not tight enough yet, but how tight do you want to start out with?
Well, we're going to tighten it up enough that it won't come off or turn underneath her. But since we're not going to be roping bulls, it doesn't have to be real tight. And I would say take the halter off of her altogether, unless she might be hard to catch, which I doubt. And I'm going to stay in the center with you and let you be my bodyguard while you move her around here a little bit.
Hey, well.
So about now, I say to myself, could I ride this one if I was in the middle of her? And I'm not ashamed to say that I'd be picking dirt out of my mouth by now. There goes her saddle pad. That's not the worst thing in the world, and there goes the saddle though, and that's more concerning. So that's why you don't want your saddle too awful loose. Well, she's gonna start looking for some help here in a minute. Just don't hurry her. She'll be looking for help here real shortly. So I would just halter her up. I don't think I'd do that till I haltered her. So that's the deal. You want to have it tight enough that that doesn't happen. But it's sort of an object lesson, and I'll tell you what, it's not the only time that's ever happened or I've ever seen it happen. But this time, the nice thing is I have somebody else I can blame it on. So what we're going to do is we'll pull that saddle completely off. I would pick up that rope, Jeffy. There you go. Now loosen it up. And why don't we put the pad back on? It might be a little more comfortable for her. And it's one more time to saddle her, because the saddling wasn't the issue. It was what happened after you saddled her. There's your pad. You're in charge. I'm not going to approach her because she doesn't know who I am. Yeah, see, that's not a concern to her. They don't connect the two things necessarily. So take your time. So that's why, if anybody has not figured this out in their own life, you don't just put a saddle on a horse, climb on their back, and ride them off. That's what they used to do long ago out west. And that's where you got the bronc ride starting.
Do that in New Park too. So they used to do that in New Park too.
So see if you can double that latigo through enough times that you don't tie it, that you run the pin through it. Yeah, gather up your rope and pull it tight enough that you don't want an instant replay. And I would pull it one more hole.
Okay.
I would be careful stepping away from her hip there.
I was watching.
Okay. Now she's searching right now. And I think she's wondering if she really needs to buck or whether she could just walk off. We don't need to push her, but I'm thinking if I invited her to move her hip, so I would pick up that lunge whip and just gently move her off the spot. Don't hurry her, but see if you can walk her off. Hard thing to do, but see if she'll just walk off. There you go. Now she's saying, huh, that thing's still on. And I'm still alive. And so's Jeff. So everybody's happy. Except that certain kind of viewer that watches for disasters, but we won't go there. See how hesitant she is. She's tracked up, as they say. She's, interestingly, doesn't have a huge knot in her back, but when she grabs herself, then she bows her back pretty good. So she's studying how this is going to work. Yep. And you're doing it exactly right. You're just helping her. You don't need to push her, but you don't want her to stop and get balled up again. When they get all wadded up, the first move they make often is pretty dramatic. Yeah, send her off that same way. Just sort of shake that whip at her a little bit. There, did you see her thinking? Yeah, just sort of keep her feet moving. Oh, don't be too aggressive there. Just as long as they're moving. There you go. There you go. Because every time she stops, she sort of thinks about that saddle. When she's moving forward now, she's realizing it's just going with her. It's not hurting her.
She's got her ear on me.
Yeah, and I love the way she thinks. And she's thinking, should I buck? Can I buck this off, or should I just trot around? And she's starting to say, well, I could just trot around. Let her go that way. She's on her own time now. Just keep her moving somewhere. There you go. Doesn't matter where. The interesting thing is, she always knew where she was. Aside from the very first time when she got a little close to the fence, she didn't run into anything, she didn't run over anybody, she's not gonna run over anybody. And if she does run over anybody, it'll be this guy here. And she's always knows where her feet are. Plus, I've seen horses buck like she did. They'll buck themselves off their feet. One thing we're learning about this mare is she's gonna be hard. You couldn't teach her to fall. And I love that. Good trotter, the humps coming out of her back. So what we wanna do, I think, is we let her walk around with the saddle on for a few minutes to see if she has any more little outbursts. Then we'll unsaddle her, and we'll saddle her again after we eat chicken and eat pie. So you get two for the price of one. We'll saddle her a couple of times today and see how things go. There is absolutely nothing this filly has done today that was either mean or crazy. And as long as they're not mean or crazy, you can do whatever you want with them. It's just going to take a little time to get her confident. There. Soon as she wants to relax, Jeff, when she quits narrating, catch her up, rub her a little bit, tell her she's a good girl. And we'll let her carry the saddle a little bit, but I think it's worthwhile to catch her and just let her know that, in fact, we could catch her and unsaddle her right now. I wouldn't hesitate to do that. The argument is we could leave her there to wear that saddle for a while, but I'd rather have her think that we're a source of relief, and we'll take the opportunity to resaddle her later. That's a judgment call, and I've got years of bad judgment to rely on.
I'll testify to that.
And there's Jeff doing his no hands thing. Scares me to death. You're braver than I am, Jeffy. Yeah.
She leans on me for support.
Yep. And Jeff's saying this is one way to get used to get to know him. And the fact is, if you trust your horse, that begins that two-way street of trusting each other. Tell you a little deal with her. Now, if she would buck or something, this is one of those good halters and has the silver tips on it, but I would tuck it in there and get the tail pointing more at the tail, so that doesn't flip around and hit her in the eye, because those metal tips make it very durable, but I've had a horse one time smack that right into their eye, and it, yeah. Now I would pick up the line and then take a hold of the saddle horn and wiggle that saddle around a little bit. Yeah, that's a good look. Now just see if maybe you can slap your hand on the top of the saddle just lightly. Good. Take that off and kiss her right on the lips. So that's the first saddling, and maybe we'll put up the second saddling to see, does she go back to being kind of bronky again, or does it stick? So that's for this episode. We might cut a little bit more footage in later. We'll see. Till next time.